The Russo-Ukrainian war, a chasm of pain and destruction, continues to haunt the collective soul of Ukraine and shake the geopolitical balances of the world. On this 16th of June 2025, poignant images impose themselves. Men in hazmat suits carrying the remains of Ukrainian soldiers returned by Russia in a silence heavy with meaning. Russian diplomats announce with a voice tinged with bitterness the cancellation of talks with the United States. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy from Vienna extends a hand to Donald Trump to plead for weapons, the last bulwark against the attrition of an endless conflict. These three snapshots, captured in a single day, embody the inextricable tangle of human tragedy, diplomatic failures, and struggles for a nation's survival. They remind us that more than 3 years after the Russian invasion, peace remains a chimera, and every step toward resolution seems accompanied by a retreat into the abyss. Hey there, it's Carlos. I hope you're doing well. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to stay informed about all the latest economic and political news in just a few minutes a day. Imagine for a moment Ukrainian families, hearts heavy with grief, waiting in anguish for the return of the bodies of their sons, husbands, brothers fallen on devastated battlefields. On this 16th of June, Ukraine marked the completion of a staggering repatriation operation, receiving 1,245 remains of its soldiers killed in the war against Russia. Rustem Umerov, Ukraine's defense minister, announced with solemn gravity that this transfer brought the total number of bodies returned in a single week to over 6,000, a figure that chills the blood. These exchanges, among the largest since the Russian invasion in February 2022, are the result of agreements reached during talks in Istanbul earlier this month. On the other side, Vladimir Medinsky, a Kremlin aide, stated that Moscow had handed over the remains of 6,060 Ukrainian servicemen, receiving in return those of 78 Russian soldiers. A slight discrepancy in the numbers. Ukraine reports 6,057 bodies, lingers like a dissonant note, but without immediate explanation. This macabre ritual, orchestrated under the fragile auspices of a humanitarian consensus, only scratches the surface of a conflict where the living remain prisoners of a war without a horizon. But that's not all. At the same moment, thousands of miles away, Russia drops a diplomatic bombshell. The United States has cancelled the next round of bilateral talks meant to ease tensions between the two powers. Maria Zakharova, spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, delivered this news with a restraint that barely masked her frustration. These discussions, initiated by Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump after the latter's return to the White House in January, aimed to diffuse irritants in Russo-American relations, a euphemism for a dispute as vast as it is icy. Under the Biden administration, Moscow accused Washington of plunging relations below zero with its military support for Ukraine and crushing sanctions. Zakharova did not specify why the Americans suspended these talks, but she hinted at hope that this pause would not last long. This announcement, made just a week after Russia had suggested moving the discussions from Istanbul to Moscow, cast a shadow over hopes for even a modest détente between the two giants. And then there's Volodymyr Zelenskyy. From Vienna, where he spoke on this 16th of June, the Ukrainian president revealed his intention to meet Donald Trump on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada the following day. His goal? To discuss a new defense package, a polite term for arms purchases meant to bolster a Ukraine bled dry by the relentless Russian war machine. Zelenskyy, whose face bears the scars of an unrelenting struggle, knows that every missile, every tank, every shell counts in this war of attrition. This announcement, made during a press conference alongside Austrian President Alexander van der Bellen, is no small matter. It reflects the urgency of securing American support as peace talks falter and European allies, sometimes hesitant, struggle to meet Kiev's needs. To grasp the significance of these events, we must dive into other sources that illuminate and complicate the picture. A post on X, dated June 16th, shared by an influential Ukrainian account, emphasizes Kiev's determination to continue prisoner of war exchanges, a process running parallel to the repatriation of bodies. This message, shared thousands of times, underscores that despite humanitarian progress, the Istanbul talks have yielded no breakthrough on a ceasefire. An Associated Press article, published the same day and available on multiple news sites, confirms this deadlock. The Istanbul agreements were limited to humanitarian measures, with Moscow and Kiev's positions on ending the conflict remaining diametrically opposed. Russia demands recognition of its territorial gains, while Ukraine refuses any compromise on its integrity. This fracture, deep as an open wound, makes every humanitarian gesture both precious and futile. Regarding the cancellation of Russo-American talks, a comment on X attributed to a Washington-based geopolitical analyst suggests a hypothesis. The United States may have suspended discussions in response to a recent Russian escalation in Ukraine, notably intensified bombings in the east. Though unconfirmed, this theory finds an echo in Kremlin statements from the previous week, which acknowledged blockages in bilateral relations. A Reuters report, corroborated by diplomatic sources, notes that Trump, despite 5 calls with Putin since January, the latest on Saturday, is growing impatient with the lack of tangible progress toward a peace deal. This frustration, palpable in Washington circles, could explain the abrupt decision to freeze the talks, though America's silence leaves room for speculation. As for Zelensky's initiative, a Bloomberg article published on June 15th provides critical insight. Ukraine, the outlet writes, fears an erosion of Western military support, particularly in Europe, where political divisions hinder arms deliveries. The meeting with Trump, seen as an opportunity to lock in American commitment, is part of a strategy to diversify supplies. An ex-post by a Kiev-based Ukrainian journalist aligns with this view. Zelensky knows Trump can be unpredictable, but he has no choice but to take the chance, especially with the US Congress reluctant to release funds. These analyses converge on a harsh reality. Ukraine, exhausted by 3 years of war, walks a tightrope, suspended between the need to rearm and the fragility of its alliances. What are the consequences of this June 16th? They are manifold, intertwined, and carry the seeds of future upheavals. The repatriation of bodies, first, is an act of dignity for Ukrainian families, but it also serves as a cruel reminder of the scale of losses. Each coffin returned rekindles grief, but also galvanizes a people's resolve not to yield. Rustem Umarov, in a Facebook post, drove the point home. We will not stop. We continue for our prisoners, our dead, our country. This operation, though symbolic, strengthens national unity but also highlights the absence of progress toward ending hostilities, each returned body a tangible proof of the human cost of the stalemate. The cancellation of Russo-American talks next is a blow to those hoping for even a marginal improvement in Moscow-Washington relations. This setback risks exacerbating tensions not only bilaterally but globally, as a broken dialogue between these powers weakens efforts to contain a conflict with international ramifications. If the US acted in response to Russian provocations, as some suggest, it could signal a tougher stance from Washington, despite Trump's repeated calls for negotiation with Putin. Conversely, if this cancellation reflects strategic hesitation, Moscow might perceive it as weakness, emboldening Russia to harden its stance in Ukraine. Either way, this blockage complicates the search for a diplomatic solution, leaving Ukraine to face an adversary emboldened by the absence of an American counterweight. Finally, the Zelensky-Trump meeting, if it materializes, could mark a turning point in Ukraine's ability to sustain its military resistance. A new influx of American weapons would bolster Ukrainian defenses, particularly in the eastern regions where Russia is gaining ground, but this approach is not without risks. Ukraine's reliance on Western deliveries, as Bloomberg notes, exposes it to structural vulnerability. A policy shift in Washington could dry up this vital flow. Moreover, a heightened focus on arms purchases could divert resources from diplomatic efforts, reinforcing the notion that this conflict will be settled on the battlefield rather than in negotiation rooms. For Zelensky, this meeting with Trump is a gamble, convincing a US president known for his unpredictability that unwavering support for Ukraine serves American interests. In sum, this June 16, 2025 is a tragic condensation of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict's state. The repatriated bodies recall the sacrifice of a nation mourning its heroes while refusing to surrender. The cancellation of Russo-American talks reveals the fragility of diplomatic bridges in a polarized world, and Zelensky's quest for weapons from Trump embodies the urgency of a Ukraine fighting for survival, caught between the faint hope of international support and the reality of an endless war. These events, woven with humanity and strategy, challenge us. How many more bodies, how many more broken dialogues, how many more battles before the horizon clears? Stay tuned to this channel to follow the evolution of this drama, as each day brings new revelations about a crisis reshaping our era.